Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Leading Clean Energy Communications as part of our 12th Annual Renewable Energy Summit. Thank you all for joining us, both virtual attendees and in-person attendees. Thank you to people who have been coming since this summit was a 100-person event on the UW campus. To those of you that are joining for the first time today, our largest summit to date with probably 650 in-person attendees by the end of the day. So thank you so much for being here. I also want to say a big thank you to all of our sponsors. This event would not be possible without them, but particularly Green Penny and Invenergy, our presenting sponsors. Thank you all for your support. Before we get started, a couple logistical things. Our panelists today have prepared some talking points, but we also want to hear your questions. So we've allowed some Q&A time at the end. Virtual attendees can post questions on the event app. Our new board member, Beth Esser, is monitoring that space. She will be the conduit between the virtual and the in-person space. I thought you all would appreciate that electrical reference, but maybe it went over your head. And for in-person attendees, you feel free to put the question on the app if you're more comfortable with that. Otherwise, there's a handheld microphone in the middle of the room. We're just going to leave that stationary. If you have a question, feel free to get up and stand behind the mic and ask a question to the room. I am joined today by two very talented panelists, and unfortunately, Tonyisha Harris is sick with the flu and is not able to join us today. She was so kind enough to record a video for me, which I got right before we started. So while Bob and Mariah are talking, I'll do my best to get this queued up in the background, but if you see some messy stuff on the screen, that's what's happening there. I do want you to hear about Tonisha's work. She's doing great work with Action for Climate Emergency. So our other two panelists that are in the room, we have Mariah Lynne, CEO of Steward Consulting, and we have Bob Lindmeier, meteorologist at WKOW. So without further ado, Bob, why don't you start us off and talk about your work and your audience?
Very good. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending our session. We're all here concentrating on solutions, which is where we should be. But for much of the general public, still many of them have to be sold that we need the solution. So for broadcast meteorologists like myself, what we can do very effectively is communicate the science of climate change and the consequences, including local consequences within their viewing area. And also get into solutions too, but especially the science and the consequences. And broadcast meteorologists have, I think, kind of an outsized role in their ability to communicate to the public. We're a highly trusted source. First of all, 46% of the viewing public receives the weather on a daily basis. So that audience is there for us to tap into very readily. 60% of Americans strongly or somewhat agree that they trust television weather reporters for global warming information. We're easily accessible to a diverse audience. Surveys have shown that local news audiences are highly diverse, including members of all education groups, income brackets, and racial and ethnic groups. And we're effective communicators. Audiences show a more accurate understanding about climate change and related risks when a TV meteorologist report on these subjects. So to kind of sum up, we're trusted sources who have extraordinary access to the public. We're highly talented and well-engaged science communicators. That's what we do every day. We take the current weather picture and translate it in a way that the general public can agree. And also, we're very active and access news and effective communication platforms not often reached by most climate scientists. So we can be, as a scientist, as a meteorologist, kind of the spokesperson for the climate scientists. We can expand what they're trying to reach out to the public and communicate that to them. And luckily, broadcast meteorologists have really increase their understanding about climate scientists and about climate science and their acceptance of climate science. And now it's to the point that 80% of broadcast meteorologists not only understand that climate change is happening, but that it is human caused, and that has increased significantly in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, there was definitely a significant portion of the broadcast meteorology community that wasn't sure about it, but now they really are. But it's a challenge for broadcast meteorologists, too, to talk about climate change. We have a lack of time to prepare. A lot of us are doing 5, 6, 7, even 8 shows a day. So fitting that in is a challenge. We just have a lack of presentation time within our presentations. We have 2-3 minutes to talk, and usually it's just barely enough time to get the weather in, much less talk about climate. For many, it's a barrier just not knowing enough about climate science. If you're going to talk about it, you got to know about it inside and out to comfortably communicate that information. So just getting that knowledge base up is a challenge. And that makes them not comfortable talking about climate change. There's resistance from many managements of station groups and TV stations. I'm very fortunate at WKOW. They are very accepting of allowing me to talk about climate change. There's a fear that viewers will complain, the fear that they'll actually lose their jobs. So there are barriers, but those barriers have been overcome. And just to wrap up, the American Meteorological Society, which I'm part of, has a station scientist committee, which encourages broadcast meteorologists to be the station scientist. And so we're really encouraged to see more and more broadcast meteorologists talk about climate change. Just not broadcast meteorologists, though. It's the news reporters within their organization making specials. AJ Biapart for WKOW, just an in-depth special on solar installations for our station just late last year.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob. What a great representation. I didn't think about meteorologists as such an important conduit. And boy, do we need you. I can say that wholeheartedly in that as my introduction, I'm Mariah, Lynne, the president and owner of Good Steward Consulting. I founded the company 6 years ago and narrowed the focus of what we do about 4.5 years ago to public outreach and community education for utility scale renewable energy projects. So wind, solar, battery storage, 100 megawatts or higher. When I started the company about 4.5 years ago, it was just me. We have now grown to a staff of over 40. We're headquartered in Albert Lea, Minnesota, which is a very rural community. I live in Heartland, Minnesota, population 318. We have a gas station, 2 churches, a bar, and an implement specialist there. So I know what it's like to live rural, and when I entered into this industry, one thing that was really interesting to me, I entered the industry by happenstance. There was a development company that was putting up a utility-scale wind farm in my home county, and I happened to live next to Alliant Energy's Bent Tree Wind Farm in Freeborn County. So I had exposure, of course, to wind, but all of my exposure was very positive. My husband at the time, my kids will be 5th generation on a Century farm that's over 130 years old. My husband at the time rented ground that hosted wind turbines, and we watched the wind turbines go up. I remember my son, John Paul, who's now 13, he was about 1 or 2 when they went up, and I remember taking the minivan out and parking on the edge of the field, opening the side door of the minivan and letting him sit there in his car seat and watch the heavy equipment while I caught up on work, right? So all of his friends were watching the videos that you put in with the heavy machinery and all the music, and he's sitting there watching wind turbines being erected. I had a very positive firsthand experience with Alliance wind farm on my side of the county. Unfortunately, the other side of the county, when they were trying to site a different wind farm, they were met with a lot more resistance, a lot more opposition. And I started to get involved in that one. And one of the things that became very obvious to me is that there needed to be a change in this industry in the understanding of host communities and the value of understanding a host community's culture. Right? I think all too often what happens is we classify people as either they live in the metropolitan area or suburban area, or they live in a rural area. And unfortunately, that doesn't give any justice to the unique culture, value system, influencers within every niche. Every small community, every large community has their own, what I would consider to be sociological ecocenter, right? So what I started to do 4.5 years ago was come up with a way to more effectively communicate with rural audiences. So of the 40 people that I mentioned being on staff right now, we're active in 12 states and experienced in 15 states. So right now I think actively, RJ, how many projects do we have? 27 active projects, all over 150 megawatts, wind, solar, and battery storage. RJ is my VP of operations. If you have any specific questions, he's the one with all the answers. But what is really interesting is that all of these 40 people are like me. They live in rural communities, they have agricultural backgrounds, and they know how information travels and how we can effectively communicate in smaller host communities and with farm families, a lot of them multi-generational, whether that's the participating landowner or the concerned next door neighbor or the township trustee who's been on the same township, on the same board for 45 years because nobody else will take his seat, and that's his corporate responsibility or citizen responsibility, right? So we've taken that and tried to find the best way that we know how to build and establish trust and to recognize the fact that these projects, whatever their technology is and whatever their scale is, these projects are going to be corporate citizens for 30 plus years in a rural community. And how can we be responsible about being effective in communications and addressing the issues that are at hand from the very beginning all the way through construction, post-construction, and into operations? How are we communicating with the host communities and the landowners? And that's our core focus. That's what we do all day, every day. When my kids first started asking what I do, I laughed and said, I get yelled at all day by people that don't like wind and solar. And it's really true. There are a lot of people that are very passionate about their environment. And we have to kind of understand there is the environment that we all know, this global environment. There's also the environment of culture. And when you're in a small town or a small rural area, that is theirs. And when we try to change something, anyone, whether it's somebody that's in my community or outside of my community, tries to change something, change can be extremely difficult. And change comes with fear. And fear comes with the spread of very dangerous misinformation and rumor, right? So what we do and specialize in and what you all should be doing and trying to accomplish is to understand what the behavioral science is behind that fear so that we can remove that barrier and really begin to educate people on the positives of this technology, on the need for it, and also on the opportunities that come along with it. Just in closing, I'm going to share with you something really special that happened to me as I was leaving. Again, Heartland, Minnesota, 318 people. I said we have a gas station. I drive a diesel Chevy Silverado, so they don't see me coming, right? I look like everybody else. But it's wrapped, and it's got good Steward consulting and wind turbines and solar panels on it. And I pulled up to the gas station to get a cup of coffee before we left town. And as I pulled up to the gas station, sitting at the pump was a wind turbine blade repair truck, right? I won't say the brand because they didn't pay me. So, but there's obviously 2 turbine techs who are there to do blade work, and they're filling up their pickup truck, and they're going into the gas station. And I thought, this is ironic. I should get out and take a picture, but it was really cold, so I didn't do that. But then, as I'm sitting there, another big, brand new pickup truck pulled in to the parking lot, and I looked in the rearview mirror, and I knew the guy. He hosts 4 wind turbines, and he gets a new pickup truck every 2 years. And every time his neighbors ask him how he has all that money, he said, that's the truck that the wind farm bought for me, because he points to his wind leases, right? And so I'm thinking there are 3 people in this parking lot, in this town of 318 people, and all 3 of them are earning income from the wind industry. And they're all going into this tiny little gas station who is receiving these wind dollars and is able to, for instance, they just put in new flooring, which is a big deal in a small town, right? I'd like to say that wind bought that flooring, right? So these are the kinds of stories and the kinds of interactions that really happen. This is the real stuff that happens when a community hosts a renewable energy project, and all of that economy starts really going and popping. And these are the stories that I like to get out there and share for my clients when we're connecting with new host communities and landowners.
Thank you, Mariah. Thank you, Bob. I do have a video from Tonyisha. It's from Tonyisha, so I'm sure it's fabulous, but I have not watched it and I have not tested it. So we will give it a whirl. I do have some great tech support in the back of the room, so it shouldn't be too long if there is an issue.
Hi, my name is Tonyisha Harris, and I am the Associate Director of Communications and Partnerships at Action for the Climate Emergency. At ACE, we educate, inspire, and support young people to take the fight for their future, and we believe the people best situated to talk to young people are other young people. And so, to the best of our ability, we are always sending out communications that come from young people, or about young people, or for young people. In terms of our social and digital presence, we use a combination of entertainment and education, or edutainment, to attract the passive information consumer. And so with reputable climate science-backed information to create our content, with a blend of entertainment, such as micro videos, following the latest TikTok trend, flashy animations, and etc., we're able to attract the passive information consumer and get them to at least digest the information that we're putting out. For example, our content engages people on all sides of the climate-believing spectrum, and we can cause quite the discourse in our comment section. Recently, we put out a post on banning gas stoves due to the harmful indoor air quality that they cause, and our comment section sparked quite the debate in our comment section from young people and people of all generations. And this is how we break through the noise. We get the discussion started. We talk about things that young people want to hear about, often from the perspective of a young person. I myself am a youth climate and environmental justice activist. And once we break through the noise, we're able to engage the passive information consumer, and then through science-backed education and anecdotal evidence, we're able to push the needle. For example, the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase is a common talking point in the climate discourse, but it doesn't move a climate skeptic. What it does is providing information about why this impacts them. And oftentimes, it's deciding on who the best messenger is. So when we're working with rural communities, for example, we may not even say the word climate change. We might say changes in weather. We might just describe the impacts that climate change has on a farming community or a rural community without mentioning the word climate change. And we're always going to bring it back to why young people matter. Because young people have the moral authority to speak on the climate emergency, we often want to imbue the most power in them. Our audience want to learn about climate change and understand how they can help fight it. We have over 800,000 young people in our Youth Action Network that came to us from a mixture of edutainment, either through our digital space or an in-classroom, in-school assembly, or they heard of it from word of mouth. Again, hearing from young people to communicate to other young people is one of our strongest recruitment tactics. And we learned that young people are interested in the policies. They want to know how to support policies that will get us to 100% clean, renewable energy with a just transition in an equitable way. They want to see the end of fossil fuel dependency, and they want to support these policies. It's more so just letting them know what's there. And so, for example, in Wisconsin, the way we've been communicating to our Youth Action Network members in Wisconsin is like educating them about the bills that are out there, the politics around getting these bills passed, empowering them to start their own action teams to take a fight and a stance on this, and using communication tactics that really dive deep into these policies in a way that they can understand. So the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, we know that our young people have a lot of questions about that. Some of those in which are, what is the IRA? How can a young person like me take advantage of the opportunities and benefits through the IRA? Where can I find jobs from the IRA? And again, always back to that question of what exactly is it? As a part of ACE's Bold Climate Policy Campaign, we're conducting robust education about the IRA and other bills to our network. And again, it's through a mix of edutainment and peer-to-peer learning.
Awesome.
She's so good.
Tonyisha, if you're listening, thank you so much for doing that on a morning when you are sick. I really appreciate it. I think that Tonyisha's on the app this morning, so feel free to engage with her there. And if she is not, I will make sure that she gets all of the messages that are posted on there. And Beth, if you see something really juicy pop up, just step over to the microphone and share it with all of us, okay? Oh. So a great thing that Tonyisha did is she answered a lot of the questions that I was planning to pose to all of the panelists. So I'm going to, in a perfect world, I would have had it all queued up and I've asked the question and then I'd play her answer, but that did not happen. So we're going to back up a little bit. And Tonyisha talked about social media. How many communications professionals, marketing professionals are in the room? Quite a few that I saw on Whova. So social and digital media, as we all know. And I thought it was really interesting that Tonyisha says she kind of welcomes the discourse that happens, like the controversy that happens on social media. It scares me oftentimes. But social media creates echo chambers of very polarized opinions. It's difficult to break through the noise, and it's hard to share new information without hostile backlash. And if I am the only one experiencing this, please talk to me and tell me what I'm doing wrong. So Mariah and Bob, what is your approach to social media and digital engagement? And do you think there's a potential to grow clean energy supporters in this space? And if so, how?
You want to go first or you want me to?
Sure, I can go first. Yeah, social media for broadcast meteorologists in particular is such an important way to get out the information, because for a lot of broadcast meteorologists, they can't really talk very much about climate change on air. Management might not want them to. Or again, there's the time constraints and you really can't get into it. But social media is there, and many managements say that's okay, so use that venue. We're just so in tune to social media. It's part of our world now. When I first started 40 years ago, what was the internet, much less anything else. But now it's an integral part of our communication, and it's something we spend a lot of time on every day to discuss. So using social media is a key role for us. One thing I want everybody to keep in mind, though, when it comes to the pushback that you're going to get on social media, and we all experience it. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the 6, let me get this right, through the Yale Climate Change Communications. There's 6 different categories of belief in climate change. One is, let me get this right. Okay, there we go. Good news, 30% are alarmed in the general public in the United States. That's up 20% from just 5 years ago. 28% are concerned, 17% are cautious, 8% are disengaged, 10% are doubtful, and 9% are dismissives. It's that 9% of dismissives that have this huge outsized voice when it comes to pushback. Mm-hmm. They're on the different communications of social media. So keep that in mind. When you're getting that pushback, more than likely it's from that small percentage. And the rest of the 91%, you really don't hear too much about.
Good point. All of our projects have positive social media. Nobody ever says anything negative ever. On average, we have staff. We do social listening, and we have a social media manager. I encourage all of our clients that are going to be citing projects to have a Facebook page. Facebook, because we see opposition most likely to organize on Facebook based on the demographic of users. We don't see a lot of opposition on some of the other channels. One, LinkedIn, it's more professional. You go to Twitter and you go to some of these other ones, and it's more young people who tend to be more accepting of change. So Facebook is really the platform where we spend a lot of our time doing the social listening, where we find a wealth of information, I should say a wealth of misinformation that is targeted at our projects. We keep a very close eye, very close tabs on all of the opposition comments and on all of the opposition groups. I don't think there's a single project that we work on, well, probably 2 or 3, but the majority of the projects have a coalition against industrial scale, fill in the blank, in fill in the blank county, fill in the blank state. Right? So there's a playbook. They know how to do this. It's a very large network of people who are reaching out to other communities that are being given the opportunity to host these sites. So if it's somebody from Iowa, we see this all the time. There will be a opposition leader that is very prominent in the state of Iowa that will reach out to somebody who has made a negative comment with regards to the project, and then all of a sudden the project opposition page is formed as a group on Facebook, and then the rhetoric starts pouring in. We watch that. We don't engage with it, and we actually encourage our participating landowners to keep an eye on what they're hearing and what they're seeing, and to let us know, but not to go there and respond. These are, like Bob said about the climate change acceptance, there's 10% that are just going to be against this belief. We also believe that in a host community, there's the 80-10-10 rule. There's 10% of the population that wants this to move forward and is engaged in positive interaction. There's 10% that do not want this to move forward, and they're engaged in oppositional action. And there's the 80% in the middle that have yet to form an opinion. Right? We want to reach the 80%. We don't want to engage with the 10% who are against the project, because in my experience, I've talked to thousands of oppositional people, probably at this point, multiple thousands of oppositional people, one-on-one, to hear them out and to listen to what their concerns are. And I can say with pretty pure confidence that out of all of those people, maybe 2 were willing to actually listen to the responses, right? So we go through the action of listening, because everybody wants to be heard. But I'm not going to spend the project's time on informing or trying to attempt to change the opinion of somebody who is oppositionally stubborn about their position. I'm rather going to spend the project's time and our team's time trying to influence the 80% of people who have yet to form an opinion, and spending the rest of that time supporting the 10% of the people that are very positive on what we're doing and why we're doing it. So for us, a couple of things. Facebook pages, we encourage our clients to have one. We actually do not engage with comments. I have done that in projects in the past, and it has been fruitful in some cases, and in other cases, it's just a big dark hole that everybody goes down, and it ends up taking more time away from the project development staff and the communication staff, because if you have comments on, you need to be interacting, right? So we'll either hide the comments and encourage people to, or not hide, but disable comments, encourage people to reach out out to us via Facebook Messenger if they would like to have a discussion or further discuss any of our posts. And then we watch the opposition pages, right? So if they have a post at 8 o'clock on Monday morning that says solar panels are going to leak toxins into the groundwater, then on Tuesday afternoon, the project has a post that says, why are solar panels safe? Are toxins released? What happens when a solar panel breaks, right? So they say this negative thing, we don't address it directly, and we come up with the positive thing to reinforce the positive information, right? We use Facebook also because we like to have a conduit to communicate with as many people as possible. So we'll have a local office typically in a project area so you can communicate face-to-face, a project phone number, a project email address, a project website, and a project Facebook page. Because some people don't really have the desire to communicate one-on-one. Some people want to write a rant on social media, and they want to send it on Facebook Messenger at 3:30 in the morning. That's okay. We want to give everybody the opportunity to communicate with us and the project in whatever manner best suits them, at whatever time best suits them. So I do see social media as a very positive tool, but also a very dangerous platform to communicate with it.
Yes. Thank you, Mariah. I want to ask one more question prepared and then open up questions from the audience. The whole theme of this summit is the Inflation Reduction Act and its potential to transform Wisconsin's energy industry. Tonyisha mentioned, her audience, they want to know what it is, and they want to know how it affects them, and where are these jobs that everybody's talking about. So my question for the other two panelists is, what questions need to be answered by policymakers and the clean energy industry? What do your audiences need and want to know about the IRA?
I can start. I think simplification of the IRA and documents, more coverage, more pieces, more fact sheets, more industry NGOs such as Renew. Digesting that information and putting it into something that is easily understood in layman's terms is really important. And I think that's what Tonyisha was really pointing to. She also said something that really resonated with me. When we go out to projects, we don't talk about the IRA. Right? We also don't talk about climate change. Just like she mentioned, she's changing her approach in rural communities because we don't talk about religion, politics, and we don't talk about climate change. Why is that? Because these are polarizing topics, and we already have enough polarization just in the fact that we're attempting to bring change to their community, right? So it's really important from my standpoint that we have more resources from third parties, not from development companies, utilities, or contractors, but from third-party NGOs and organizations that we can pass out with a simplified explanation of the benefits, right? So maybe just a generalization on what this is, but also why does it matter, right? Talking about the job creation opportunity. The one other ask I would have is everybody is always so confused whenever anything drives this industry forward that it's costing them tax dollars, right? So I think we have to have more open discussions and more education with regards to the principles of subsidies right? Like, how many times have you had a conversation with somebody and it's like, renewable energy, what? Are my taxes going to go up because you need all the tax money because you have all these subsidies? And you think, that's not how it works. So I think just simplification of the major benefits that are in there by way of opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. And Tonyisha said it really well too. What does this mean for me? And so how can we make that resonate with people in all different scales, at all different levels, ages, economic background, right? Everything. And that's a lot of work. So good luck. But but I do think breaking it down for the general citizenry is really, really important. And there's so many different angles we can take that with.
Great.
Yeah.
Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, that's definitely an area that needs to be addressed, IRA, and making sure that people understand it. For us, as a broadcast meteorologist on TV, I leave that up to the news department to talk about, understandably. But the other avenue I go through is giving talks to the public. I'm able to use my voice, my visibility within the viewing area. When I have a talk and they say it's me, that's more likely to get them in to see my talk about climate change. So that's where I can talk about not only the science and the consequences, but delve heavily into the solutions and talk about the IRA and have a discourse, a conversation about it. So that's where I find my way to be able to address that.
Thanks, Bob. We are running short on time, so I want to allow any questions from the audience. Looks like Beth maybe has one from online. And just so we can accommodate questions, we'll try to keep answers super succinct so we can get everyone's curiosities out there.
All right. So the question is, how do you gauge or start to understand the local culture and social norms? And related, how do you incorporate behavioral and social science research into your communication efforts?
Very carefully. We actually go boots on the ground. It's the tagline for Good Steward, boots on the ground, is because we do put on our farm boots and our jeans, and we take a farm vehicle and we go to a rural community. We do this, I do this, along with a member of the communications staff. We go and observe. I might have been to your community and you didn't even know that I was there or why I was there. Eat in the diners, pump gas at the gas station, go to a local meeting, talk to people, play darts, open pull tabs, buy beer for people. We do that, and it gives us a lot of information. We're lucky in the fact that we get to blend in. So if I'm in southern Indiana and I decide that I'm going to go to a small town, right? I'm there for work. Nobody knows this. And I am going to go and sit down, belly up to the bar, and start talking about how I'm from Heartland, Minnesota, population 318. And it's really interesting because there's a guy there who is a big landowner and we're small landowners, and just start talking, and you can learn so much about a community, right? We also have one-on-one conversations when we're first engaged with our projects, where we meet with participating landowners who have signed up, and we'll meet with them one-on-one, and we don't talk about the project. We talk about them. We talk about where they live. We talk about what was the most recent thing that really made a big wave here. Somebody tried to put up what? Right? Was it a strip club out on County Road 7, and then you had entireties of community members who were coming out with pitchforks? Was it an ethanol plant? What was it? Right? So we spend copious amounts of time. It's very labor intensive, but we do this because it's so important for effective communication. We need to understand who we're communicating with, and in order to understand, we need to get in there, go one-on-one, and actually learn. We also meet with local stakeholders, economic development directors, people of that nature, and ask them, again, we don't talk about the project, we talk about where they live. What's it like here, right? Who are the influencers? And really learn all of that information before we come up with a public outreach strategy. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, Mariah, I'm really impressed by your knowledge on the social science side. That's one thing. I'm an atmospheric scientist, but I've become more and more of a social scientist, I've found. And my Bible that I go to frequently is from my idol, Katharine Hayhoe. And it's Saving Us is her book. And it gets into not only the climate science, but it gets really into the social science. So that's a book I really recommend everybody read, because that's what I get when I have a question about the social science side. I go to her book.
Smart.
Thank you.
Jyhoe.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mark Walter. I'm with Savion, Utility Scale Solar and Energy Storage, a proud sponsor of today's conference. In my work, I encounter a lot of people who I cynically want to say are using motivated reasoning to basically, you're in my community, It's been an ag community forever. I would like it forever to remain an ag community. And I admittedly, this is my own internal cynicism, thinking, okay, these people don't want to look at this, or these people don't want change. And then there's 100 excuses for what else is bad about this, right? If it's wind, it's wind turbine syndrome. Your chickens are going to lay soft eggs. Your cows are going to, fall over. And if it's solar, chemicals leaking into the soil, and things that are verifiably untrue.
Correct.
How do you try to get to the bottom of what the real concern is and address that? Or do you actually engage on the individual arguments somehow? And what would you recommend for us who are dealing with people like this on a regular basis, and how to effectively push back on, whether we push back on the individual arguments or whether we actually go to, you think, the NIMBYism, the root of the problem, remaining an ag community? Any advice that you have would be really welcome.
Sure, Mark. Through the conversations that I've had, I can tell you that all of the opposition, I've asked question after question after question, because you're right, you can basically negate all of these concerns. The solar panels are going to leak toxins into the water. Actually, they're not. Did you know that they're made of tempered glass? Or, you just go, right? And here are some studies, and here's some resources if it's a Wisconsin project from Renew. And Renew is great in the fact that I've told them, we've worked together before, hey, there are a bunch of Wisconsin citizens here that believe these mistruths. And they'll come up with a third party fact sheet about each of these topics. So when we travel around, we've got NGO partners. We're bringing their materials, so it's not just coming from the development team or from a utility, it's coming from a third-party source. And we'll present that information. And I can go through list by list by list, and I think at this point I've heard everything, but I always say that and then I hear the next thing, like the woman in Indiana who told me that her garden wasn't going to grow because we were absorbing all of the sunlight, right? Now, we can use science to teach her that that's not really going to happen, which I did, but this woman was in tears. I mean, she was shaking. She was so fearful. This misinformation came from somebody who was looking to do fear-mongering, right? And they were being quite successful. After all of these conversations, Mark, breaking it all down, in my opinion, it comes down to really two things. I used to say three, but I really think it's two. One is they just don't want to see it. They don't want change. That's it. And there are some things we can do about that with visual screening and things of that nature sometimes, but sometimes there's not. So there's not much I can do about that. And the other, and I think most prominent, is actually economic jealousy, right? Because my neighbor has been given the opportunity to do this. And let's be frank, especially with utility scale solar farms, usually the people who are signing up their acres are the more progressive farmers. These are the guys who have been doing no-till since before no-till was a thing. These are the guys who have been dual cropping. These are the guys who have found a better way, and women, who have found a better way to be more productive with their farm ground. And so these people tend to have the bigger combines, the nicer trucks, more opportunity, right? And now, by God, they're getting the chance to earn X amount per acre. Gosh darn it. How come it's always them and it's never me? And I'm going to have to drive by that, and I'm going to have to blah, 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 blah. I can't take away someone's economic jealousy. We could offer a good neighbor agreement if they're close enough, but quite frankly, most of these people aren't even close. They're just mad that somebody else is having an opportunity. So it really comes down to, I don't want to look at it, or I don't want to look at it and it's making me really mad that I don't get to make money off of it. So there's some little nuanced things we can do to communicate those, but more than anything, we focus on making sure that for every negative misconception that we know will happen, somebody's going to say this misinformation. We've been through it enough to know. We've got these positive points, so we're focusing always on the positive. So we're putting out proactively the fact that there aren't any toxins in utility scale solar panels that are going to leak out, and here is why, and here's why it's safe, right? So we're addressing it hopefully before it's becoming an issue.
Thanks, Mariah.
Yeah.
Bob, did you want to respond to that one?
We can go ahead.
Okay. We are at time, but let's one more question and really quick answers.
Sure.
Yeah. One of the bottlenecks in getting clean energy is distribution lines, high voltage distribution lines. You're not working with those kinds of projects at this point, but is there anything different you would change in your messaging or your approach? And I don't even know that local communities have the option to really resist them too much, except through the courts. So I just appreciate your insights.
We don't, to date, work with any of the transmission line and right-of-way issues, but we are looking at that. We've been approached quite a bit lately because we all know we can't site projects and bring the power online without an increase in our commitment to the infrastructure, right? We have to have transmission. So the approach would be similar but different in the sense that it's different data, different concerns. So learning and understanding what the specific and unique concerns are and what the misinformation is really important. Understanding that side of it and then getting out both as an industry or as a provider or ATC, ITC, getting out and making sure that we're spreading the positive information before the negative information hits.
Thanks. You good, Bob?
Yeah, good.
All right, thank you all very much. Thank you, Mariah. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Tonyisha. I have one final request, if you would indulge me. As we look to expand support of clean energy, we need everybody's voice at the table. And sometimes even we're really intentional about that work, we fall short, right? I'm so grateful that Tonyisha was able to offer her voice and do a presentation for us, but it's not the same as having her at the table and really talking and having dialogue with us. So my question to you is, what are you doing to engage BIPOC communities, to engage youth in your communications work? And if you could think about that and put your answers on the app, in the programming, or send me an email, I want to learn from you. I want to know what you're doing. I want to know how we can all be better and work together. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Great job, Bob. Pleasure to meet you.